Welcome, Karen, to the Biohacker Babes. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, well, thanks for having me, babes. Hello,
Yeah.
babe. I'm happy to be here.
Yes. So happy to finally have you on the show. We had the
Yeah.
pleasure of meeting, I guess back at Dragonfly in the fall. And we have so
Mhm.
many mutual friends, and you were doing amazing work in the space of helping women, especially with balancing hormones. So you are our hormone gal for the day. Can't wait to pick your
Yeah.
brain and share this with our audience. So I think the more I learn about the hormones, the more I realize I don't know about hormones. It is a very comprehensive, confusing topic. So we're really going to get into the nitty gritty of it today. I think give a really good overview for our audience. And, you know, hormones do naturally decline as we age, right? Like that is
Yeah.
part of the aging process. But I think with our toxic environment today, a lot of us are very stressed out. It seems like we're seeing hormonal issues younger and younger. And it's like, we shouldn't see that. So
Mhm.
I know there's a
Mhm.
lot we can do with diet and lifestyle that we'll get into as well today. But before we do that, I think just to clear the air for anyone that is saying, oh gosh, hormone therapy, it causes cancer.
Mhm.
Don't do that. My doctor said don't do that. And a lot of this came from the Women's Health Initiative that was somewhat flawed. So maybe you can share a little bit more about that and kind of put people at ease as to why it's not as dangerous as they made it sound.
Yeah, because it's still super prevalent. It's crazy to me how many women, I would say majority actually, of women in North America think that hormone replacement therapy is dangerous and that it'll cause breast cancer. Like it just, like, I hear it all the time. And in the space that we're in, we have a little bit more educated audience. So we're definitely seeing more women in our audiences that have heard otherwise, and they're being more open to the idea of hormone replacement therapy. But the rest of the world, I mean, I'll come across people all the time where they're like, I was on a plane the other day, and the stewardess is like, I'm having a hot flash. And I was like, are you in perimenopause or menopause? Like, are you on hormone replacement therapy? No, should I be? And I'm like, oh my gosh, like we still don't know. We're not getting this information. So
Yeah.
whether you know it or not, if you are afraid of hormone replacement therapy or you have like a judgment towards it, it's stemming from the Women's Health Initiative, whether you know that or not, because that's where the bad taste in our mouth around hormones came from. Prior to the WHI, Premarin like traditional hormone replacement therapy came on the scene around 1950. We used to treat breast cancer with high doses of estrogen back then.
Mm,
Isn't that interesting? Wow.
very.
Premarin came on the scene, which was derived from pregnant horses' urine, which is nothing like our own estrogen. It actually converts mostly to a very inflammatory estrogen called estrone in the body. We're taking it orally, which we shouldn't be doing. But all that said, it worked. And women were feeling great from their Premarin in menopause. So great, early 1990s, it was the number one most prescribed medication in America.
No
Number
way.
one out of every single medication, Premarin was number one. 19 exceeded $1 billion in sales. Like in
Wow.
that year, like crazy. So you can imagine how many women were taking Premarin. And so they
Mm,
decided, you know what, we're going to set out to prove that hormone replacement therapy helped reduce a woman's risk of cardiovascular disease. And so they got 160,000 women involved in this research. They started the study, and they had two arms of the study that were the women themselves were on the hormone replacement therapy. One arm of the study had no uterus. The women had a hysterectomy, so they had no uterus. So they were put on Premarin only because grows the uterine lining, progesterone counterbalances that growth. So without a uterus, they were like, nah, we don't need any progesterone because we don't have to worry about this. So they were on Premarin only. The other group was on a combination of Premarin with a synthetic progestin called medroxyprogesterone acetate. About 5 years into the study, the WHI suddenly stopped the study, published an article in JAMA that said hormone replacement therapy causes breast cancer, stroke, and cardiac events. Word went out to the world. Get women off hormone replacement therapy. It's killing them. It's giving them cancer. It's going to, horrible things. 70% of women dropped their HRT.
Oh my gosh.
So
Whoa.
it plummeted. Prior to that, they estimated about 20 million women worldwide were on it. Dropped by
Wow.
70% literally overnight. We have never recovered from it, even though the exact people that published that study came out to say, oh, sorry, but they didn't say, oh, sorry, but they were like, oh, whoops, actually, it was the arm of the study where women were on the combination of progestin with Premarin. But the arm of the study where women were on the Premarin only had a 24% reduction in getting breast cancer. It showed to be breast protective. And when they looked at those women, they did like a 10-year reanalysis and a 15-year reanalysis. It continued to show that it protected their breasts and reduced their risk of breast cancer from being on Premarin. So horses' estrogen reduces the risk of breast cancer, and medroxyprogesterone acetate increases just slightly your risk of breast cancer. Well, guess what is in a ton of birth control pills, girls?
Oh, synthetic progesterone.
Yes. And some of them, medroxyprogesterone acetate very specifically, or some derivative of it. And this is being handed out like candy to our 13-year-olds, 14-year-old girls for acne, for heavy periods. We can now get birth control apparently over the counter in the United States. Do we hear ever from our doctors that, oh, this can increase your risk of breast cancer? No.
Nope.
Women in perimenopause and menopause are constantly offered birth control pills instead of hormone replacement therapy for their symptoms.
Crazy.
I had a client recently, she's been bleeding, she's 50 years old. She's been bleeding for 3 years straight. She has begged she has seen doctors, nurse practitioners, and gynecologists. She has asked every single one of them for hormone replacement, bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. They all refused her. One of them put in a medroxyprogesterone acetate birth control implant in her arm instead. And they said, we cannot give you hormones until you're in menopause. That's ridiculous. We're not hearing that, oh, you know what, from our doctors, like, hey, you know what, maybe you want to look at replacing your hormones and your estrogen specifically because it's breast protective. We don't hear this. Instead, we're being offered like hysterectomies, birth control pills, ablations for antidepressants, sleeping pills. We know too from that study that the women that were on estrogen had a 33% reduction in all-cause mortality. So on all causes of death, they had massive reduction in hip fractures. Like the list goes on. And we know now from a newer study that's being done, it's actually presently going on. It's called the 7 million study. They looked at 1 million of those women that were on HRT right now, and they see the same thing. They see that the women that are on estrogen have a lowered risk of all kinds of estrogen, lowered risk of breast cancer than the women that don't take estrogen. So we have been told the wrong advice and are still being told the wrong advice. I hear from women all the time, like, oh, my doctor said I can't start estrogen because it'll give me breast cancer. But they gave me birth control pills. So it's just like, it just drives me nuts.
I mean, it's just
as it should.
unbelievable that one study, one initiative has such far-reaching cascading effects to this day. So it not only freaked out consumers, health consumers, but it freaked out the doctors. And it sounds like the researchers too, because they didn't even complete the study.
No, and they halted the study. And then even though they did this reanalysis of it, and there's been several different institutions that have also reanalyzed that study, and that they're all showing, oh, Premarin is beneficial in many different areas of our health. And so now we have the option of using bioidentical hormones, which is even better because now we're using it transdermally. Bioidentical comes from either yams or soy. Thank you, Mother Nature. She's made a plant that we can extract a chemical from it to make a hormone exactly like our own. So we don't have to take horse's urine anymore, which is nothing like our own estrogen. We get to
But it
take this
still helped.
bioidentical. It still helps 100%. And I say this, Premarin is still better than no estrogen in menopause for your health. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I have to bring this up. The Sex and the City movie. I'm sure, I know, Lauren, you've seen it. Karen, have you seen
I've
it?
seen
Where
part of it. Yeah.
they
I think
go
I
to
turned
Abu
it off.
Dhabi. Oh, but they go to Abu Dhabi. It's like the second or third movie, but Samantha is on bioidentical hormones and she's feeling amazing. She's like 55, never felt better in her life. And she brings all her bottles of hormones to Abu Dhabi. Airport security takes them, confiscates them, throws them out. So then she's like, I'm going to die over here. I'm getting hot flashes. So she starts eating yams, like 6 yams a day. And it's just
really?
like, it's hilarious. She's like, can I get more yams? More yams. Yeah. So
Just yam diet. I don't remember
Yam
that.
diet.
That's amazing. We're gonna
I
Oh,
don't remember
yeah.
that either. That's
She's
great.
like sweating from the hot flashes and eating yams at the same time. It's so funny.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, you know, like you guys being biohackers, I always tell women, like, there's no way that you can hack your way out of ovarian loss. Like you're 100% going to lose these hormones. And there's no amount of stress reduction, cold plunging, fasting, methylene blue, whatever your favorite hack is. None of that will stop you from losing ovarian function, period. And so I think that that's really important for every woman to get in her head, because they'll almost blame themselves. Like for myself, in my early 40s, I hit early menopause. I gained like 20 pounds literally overnight. Here I was, being clean paleo for over 10 years, had maintained the same weight. I was feeling amazing, never had to count calories. I didn't drink. I totally took care of my health and was doing everything possible that I could do, thinking I'm going to sail through this time. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I felt like a failure and a fraud. And here I was, a nutritionist for women and teaching them how to lose weight and preaching about the paleo-based diet. And then that happened to me. I was horrified and I even couldn't get off my couch. I felt depressed. I had no libido. My vagina was drying up. My period was going missing. I was hot flashing and night sweating. And I'm like, how is this possible? So it can happen to the healthiest of people. And so I think we need to prepare ourselves for that. And it's not, not to be a Debbie Downer. You always have to take care of your health. All of those things will help, of course, in the end. But there's no amount of hacking except for replacing your hormones that will really take you out of that state that some women can get themselves into. And we know that just over 80% of women will have symptoms in perimenopause and menopause. 20% will have severe symptoms. And when I say severe, I'm talking like, women have taken their own lives. We know that the highest age range for women, death by suicide in women, is from 45 to 62. Estrogen helps us make serotonin, which is an antidepressant. Like, is this a coincidence that it just happens to be during this time frame of when we're in this perimenopausal and menopausal state where we feel the most symptoms out of it? Because most women will get anywhere from 10 to 20 years of symptoms of hormonal loss. And then that's not to say what comes after that that's happening on the inside. Like the hot flashes and night sweats could go away. But what about your brain? We know menopause is a brain disease just as much as it is an ovarian issue, right? Where our brain is rich with estrogen receptors. We know that estrogen replacement therapy volumizes the brain, that women that use estrogen for 6 years or longer in menopause, and one study out of the University of Arizona showed that it was 400,000 women that they were researching, which is huge. If women were on estradiol for 6 years or longer in menopause, had a 79% reduction in developing Alzheimer's.
Wow.
That is like
Wow, that's
mind
huge.
blowing.
Mm-hmm.
And yet,
Yeah.
are we hearing about this?
No.
Not
No,
in the
you haven't heard
headlines.
this, right? This
Oh.
is a disease that's very much growing in our female population that they're saying there's
Mhm.
no cure for,
Mm.
but it can be very preventative. Like, I'm not saying it's going to cure your Alzheimer's, but it certainly is preventive. It helps to maintain your brain when you
Mhm.
replace your hormones. And a lot of people will say,
Yeah.
you know, but it's natural that we go through menopause. And it's like, yeah, but it's natural for you to start dying too, right? It's, you
I
guys
was gonna
are all
ask
about
you about that.
biohacking. You're right. You're
Yeah.
biohacking and trying to throw in everything you can to stay young and anti-aging and, you know, taking the supplements and doing all of this stuff. But the loss of your hormones, none of those things is going to stop that. And so we never used to live this long. We used to die. Our average age was between 45 and 50. And so we die by the time we hit menopause. And so now we're
Mhm.
living
Mhm.
longer than ever, and we want to live a good quality of life, which is why we're biohacking. And so the alternative is you're going to start getting the effects of that hormonal loss. And a lot of things will not bring it back. There's things that you can do to help for sure,
Mhm.
but nothing compares to what the hormones are going to be doing.
Yeah,
So
it's very
in my eyes, I'm
clear.
like, I'm going to be doing everything I can to be healthy. And if all the research is telling me that I'm lowering my risk of all cause mortality, all cancers, reduces your risk by 45% in just cardiovascular deaths, which is the number one killer of women. We know that estrogen is extremely important for your heart, like bone health. You'll get osteoporosis in most cases unless you use estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone, which all are great for your bones.
Mhm.
So
Mm.
I mean, I can just go
Yeah.
on, you guys. I just get
Yeah.
so heated
No,
about
But you're
this
so
stuff.
passionate.
It's
I
great.
know. It needs to be amplified and repeated
Yes.
so many times. Okay, so estrogen, long-term solution. It's interesting you mentioned like even the healthiest person is going to experience the ovarian loss and the downstream effects of that. What else can we do on the front end of that to help this transition? Maybe even
Mhm.
before we bring in the bioidenticals. And I
Mhm.
do want to come back to like the large differences and the
Mhm.
applications, different delivery formats, because that's a whole world of confusion as well.
Yes. Yeah.
But if we're really going to start early, so even thinking about this before we start to transition, what else can we do to set ourselves up for success, knowing that it's inevitable that we're going to lose ovarian production?
Right. I mean, all the things obviously need to be part of it. And
All the things done.
all the things, I mean, this is how our clinic actually stands out from most hormone clinics is we really try to come at it from a very holistic perspective. Like, yes, we'll do the bioidentical hormones, but we want that woman to have a really good gut because your gut is where you're going to be metabolizing the bulk of a lot of that estrogen. We want, you know, your stress to be reduced because we get very sensitive to stress as we get into this hormonal loss period. So, and because our adrenal system does make a little tiny bit of progesterone, estrogen, testosterone, we want to kind of preserve our stress system as much as we can, which we
Mm-hmm.
all know everything is driven by stress, right? Stress makes everything worse. And so it's even more important though in midlife because we become so sensitive to it in our adrenal system. And you hear that from women. Women are like, oh my gosh, I just can't even take things like I used to anymore. Like my nervous system's fried. I
Yeah.
can't multitask anymore. I'm burnt out.
Mm-hmm.
So watching all of those things and making sure, you know, your blood sugar is stable. We know that insulin drives a lot of hormone dysfunction. So you guys talk about all of those things. So all the things you guys talk about, yes, you really
Yeah.
want to be
But like we
like
need it under a
even more
microphone,
so,
even more, because I find
even
so many
more
clients
so.
coming to me and the offer has been to go on birth control. Their doctor hasn't said anything about their HPA axis, about their liver, about the gut microbiome. It's
Yeah.
like those are some pretty big buckets that need some attention.
Yes. Yeah. Alcohol, like we're seeing alcohol consumption is lowered in every demographic except for middle-aged women. It's going up. So we know that
Oh,
drinking is
wow.
a big thing and it's a problem for women. It's very glamorized right now.
Mm.
And talk about like, you want to increase your risk of breast cancer. alcohol. Like,
But that's what we
it's the
think. Like, we're
worst.
stressed. We need to down regulate, got to drink a
Yes.
glass of wine the end of the night before I go to sleep to feel better.
Yes,
That's tough.
it's a woman's, like, it's how she treats herself, right? She can justify having a glass of wine at the end of the night, but she can't justify, I'm just going to go sit over here, children, and just relax for an hour. Like, women don't do that.
Yeah.
We do not take the time for ourselves, but
Mhm.
we'll justify drinking a glass of wine while we're cooking dinner or doing the
Mhm.
laundry. And
Yeah.
there's
It's
nothing more
glamorous.
detrimental to your health. Like, it really is awful. It's a vicious cycle, and I do not judge anybody for it. I was a raging alcoholic up until about 15 years ago, but so I don't judge, and I understand how hard it is to stop drinking because it is
Mhm.
so sociably acceptable to drink, and it's not sociably acceptable not to drink.
Mhm.
I get it. But if you're trying to look after your health and you want your perimenopausal and menopausal years to be as great as possible, that is like one of the number one things you should be doing, is at least cutting way back or cutting it out altogether. And when
Yeah.
people do cut it out, they'll tell you it was like the best thing they ever did.
Mhm.
It was mine. Like, when I quit drinking, it was like, it's definitely, I can look back and say that was one of the best things I ever did for myself on every level, spiritual, mental, physical, everything, was
Mhm.
cutting the alcohol. So
What
all
was
of those
the
things,
Was there
very
like an
important.
aha moment for you? Like one day you were like, that's it. I'm just gonna cut it out, or how did that happen?
Yes,
Yeah.
there was
Was that
a
fast?
moment.
Yeah.
um, I had I had just broken up with my husband, oddly enough, who is now my husband, but I he was the love of my life, and I knew it right away when we first started dating, and I ended up having to break up with him because he just wasn't getting his shit together. And so it was like the worst heartache I had ever experienced. And at that time, I was a single mother. My daughter was 1 years old. And so I was literally on the kitchen floor, hyperventilating, crying, with my daughter crawling around. And I had a moment, like a aha moment, whatever you want to call it, where I realized very, very clearly, I saw the path of my daughter, and I said, if I don't get my shit together and stop drinking and stop repeating these patterns of inviting the wrong man into my life, she's going to go down that same road. She will drink, she will be an alcoholic like I was, and she would get herself into trouble with men the same way that I did. I had been raped several times because of the alcohol, and I don't think it would have happened in those cases if had I not been drinking.
Mhm.
And I just saw it very clearly that my daughter was going to go down the same road if I didn't stop. And that was it.
Mhm.
Wow.
It wasn't
Thank you
easy.
for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a big, big part of my life, drugs and alcohol. So it was a big
Wow.
thing to stop. Yeah.
Yeah. Sure, that
Yeah.
wasn't easy. Well, goodness. Well,
No,
thank you for
but glad it
sharing
all happened. I mean,
sharing
I
that.
wouldn't be where I am today, right?
Yeah, it's part of the journey. Part of the
Part of the
journey. But
journey. I ended up getting back with my husband 2 years later, and we've been happily married now for 14 years.
oh,
It
oh.
is amazing. He got his shit together. So
That's good. It was a good wake-up
yeah,
call for him.
yeah. So back to the
Great.
question, Lauren, I'll just say, like, yes, all those things have to come into play. Also, there are some really good herbal supplements and other things that you can do, like detoxification and making sure your liver is healthy, and, like, getting rid of toxic loads, like heavy metals, or can be, and mold can really affect hormone levels and how you kind of go into perimenopause. So getting rid of all of those things, it can be very helpful. Getting rid of past trauma stuff can be very helpful. Herbals, like, there's things like Vitex. It's great for fertile women that want to help with their own production of progesterone, because progesterone is the first hormone that usually kicks the bucket and says see ya in our late 30s, early 40s. And so taking some Vitex during that time can really help with kind of getting the last out of the ovaries when it comes to your progesterone. And then eventually, when you start to lose your estrogen, which usually happens around your mid to late 40s, to start, you can do a lot of things with phytoestrogens, like black cohosh, sage, donquay, shatavari. These are all, you can usually find like a menopause supplement that has these in it. And those can be really great. Like that's what I used for the first year or so. And it really got rid of my hot flashes and night sweats and some of the symptoms I was experiencing. And it was great. But then eventually it's like, now my hormones are just gone and there's no amount of Shatavari or Donquay that's going to get estrogen out of my ovaries or make me feel the way my own estrogen did. So those what phytoestrogens act very, very softly on our estrogen receptors. Rather, xenoestrogens, the estrogens from our environment, will overtake your own production of estrogen and kind of shove it aside, and it'll take over the receptor because it's stronger. So a lot of us have estrogenic symptoms and estrogen dominant symptoms when our estrogen levels are actually totally fine. It's the xenoestrogens that are occupying those receptors. Unfortunately, no way to test this, but that's typically what's happening because their signal is so much stronger, very estrogenic. So you get all these symptoms and weight gain and not feeling well and thinking estrogen's the devil, when it's the xenoestrogens that we're being bombarded with in our environment. So cleaning up your environment's huge during this time. Like if you haven't already, you don't want stuff that has synthetic smells to it, plastics, like get rid of all of that stuff out of your house. Wherever you can control it, control it.
Yeah. It's been a very common topic on a lot of our podcasts recently. Thank God we're like all talking about this now, but I think that hit list has to come first. If you're drinking out of plastic, if you're using toxic household products, beauty care products, if you're wearing plastics, we're all wearing plastics. It's kind of hard to wear zero plastics, but wear less plastics.
Yes. Yeah.
I love my yoga pants.
Same. I know, right?
Yeah.
There's many things that we have control over, and I highly recommend doing those things, like really, really clean out your environment as much as possible from the xenoestrogens.
Such a great distinction between the two, because you're right, we do even demonize the good phytoestrogens, even things, in fruits and vegetables and seeds. I'm curious about your take on seed cycling, even through the perimenopausal transition. How helpful do you think it is? And is it something that we need to practice for years, at least months in advance? How well do you feel that works?
I don't see it working for menopausal women, not even very much so for perimenopausal women, but I do see it helping women under the age of 40. So if you're having some cycle issues, hormonal imbalance, and you're in your 20s and 30s, doing some seed cycling can be helpful. We know that flaxseed, which is part of the seed cycling program, is the most estrogenic food. So it is is the highest in phytoestrogens out of everything. So it can help. It acts, once again, it's going to act on this very mild receptor called the beta receptor. And so it's like really gentle estrogenic signaling. So it acts really nicely as an estrogen in our body, unlike the xenoestrogen. So I do see it. I've had women that it has helped in their fertile years, but I haven't seen it help past that.
Okay. Because you mentioned kind of like squeezing out the last little bit. I'm thinking about like my lotion bottle that has a little bit left. I'm like, I'm not gonna throw it away. I gotta get all the rest out. I'm like, I'm gonna do everything to squeeze the last little reserves. Okay. So interesting. So really focusing on fertile years, and maybe it does set us up for success, but it's not the thing that's going to really move the needle once we start transitioning.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Great for clarifying.
Yeah. And there's certain hormones too that you can use very safely, even when you are still cycling. So it's not that those are off the table for younger women. I used up progesterone from the time I was in my late 20s on and off for over a decade before I hit menopause. So, and my doctor prescribed that to me. Bioidentical progesterone. She was in the know, which was rare, but she was like, you have endometriosis, you have ovarian cysts, you're very estrogen dominant. Let's try some progesterone cream. And it really helped. And then I would get to the point where I was taking too much, my body was starting to produce it. And that cream wasn't suppressing my own ovarian production of it. So when it would kind of shoot back up again, I would get the symptoms of an overload of progesterone and know, okay, I shouldn't be taking this right now. And I would stop it. And sometimes I wouldn't take it for like 5 years. And then, I'm starting to get symptoms of that progesterone loss again. and I would start using it. We produce the bulk of our progesterone when we ovulate. And we know that we'll come into this world with a certain amount of eggs. And once those eggs are gone, or even when they start to dwindle, they get kind of like they're not so quality eggs anymore. We don't produce the progesterone like we did. And so if you're not ovulating or you got crappy eggs, you're not going to be producing much progesterone. And then you get that estrogen dominance and you get all these problems. And sometimes the Vitex and the other like vitamin C is good too for progesterone. It's sometimes not enough. So
Yeah.
I don't want people to think like, oh, I can't use this until I'm in menopause. That's really the wrong way to think about it. I know of practitioners that have their younger daughters that are on progesterone to help. I just gave progesterone to my daughter the other day. She was having period cramps, like horrible. She's 17. And so I was like, okay, here, I gave her a squirt of my progesterone. I said, rub this on your belly. 10 minutes later, she's like, oh, that's better.
Amazing.
So
thanks, Mom.
Yeah.
I
And
love
that's
that.
not going to screw up her fertility or anything like that. So
Yeah. That's awesome.
better than birth control.
Oh gosh.
Oh gosh,
So
we're both
toxic.
very lucky. We only fell in that trap for maybe a year or two.
2 months. 2 months exactly.
Yeah.
And it was
I think I was like
a nightmare.
16 months maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, Karen, I've told you, I was like a completely different human on birth control. Like I tried to break up with my now husband like I think like 13 times in like 2 months. He's like, "Do you think maybe that you should stop taking this birth control pill?" I'm like, "No, that's not what's doing this."
Yeah.
And I stopped it and here we are. That was like 17 years ago. So, yeah.
Oh, I
So
know. And
smart.
I
Good
know that
call.
like I'm all for women's rights and I want women to be able to choose when they get pregnant and not get pregnant and take the birth control pill by all means, but just educate yourself on it and know that the longer you're on it, the more harmful it can become, that it will, it wrecks your gut, it shrinks your brain, it increases your risk of breast cancer, heart attack and stroke. Like, I mean, it's not great for you. It's classified actually as an endocrine disruptor. It's not a hormone. And I think people have to get that through their heads is, hello, this is a very synthetic chemical endocrine hormone disruptor. It doesn't help your hormones.
It's crazy.
Disrupts them. Same as the synthetic hormone replacement, same as the xenoestrogens. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, there's other options. I mean, natural family planning and of course other means of protection and
Yeah.
So other options. What about testing? Because I've actually had some female clients that come to me with issues and I'm like, sounds like hormonal stuff. How are your hormones? Oh, my doctor checked my hormones and they're fine.
They're fine. Yeah.
They're fine. What?
You always hear that.
Yeah. So maybe you can share.
Normal. It'll be a woman too, like in menopause, who's just losing her shit. And she'll be like, my doctor told me everything's on target. Like everything's fine. I don't feel fine. And I'm like, yeah, you're fine because you have no hormones because of your age and you're in menopause. So he's looking at this going, yeah, you're right on target. You shouldn't have any hormones for your age. So you're good. And so that's just not the case. I mean, fertile women, it's really hard to test hormones because our hormones change day to day and doctors will say, go test through blood work and they don't tell you what day to take the test on. They're just like, go take the test. Well, you'll look at the ranges and it'll be like, well, if you're anywhere between, 50 and 700 or something ridiculous. Like, I don't know, I can't remember what they
all
are. Here in Canada,
possibilities.
there's really wide range. In the United States, I think it's from like, if you're from 50 to 250 or something, then you're okay. But it's ridiculous. And so you need to know when to take it. And if you take it on day 21 of your cycle, doing blood work is okay. And so you can see like if there's an imbalance that's big enough of an imbalance, it'll show up in that blood work. But it's testing total levels of hormones. And we want to see what free levels of hormones you have. Free means it's not bound to a protein. It's called sex hormone binding globulin, which goes up when you take birth control pills, just so everybody knows. If you fast too much, it goes up. If you have high amounts of that protein, and it's binding up your hormones, because you can think of it as like a bus that your hormones get shuttled around on in your body, but then it's got to get off the bus in order to dock onto that receptor and send its signal through to the cell. If it's bound, we're not able to use it. And so when we look in blood, we're getting this like, how much of this hormone do you have, bound, unbound, all together? And so it could look great. Mine looked, when I was 42 and I went into menopause, my hormones looked great in blood work, like amazing. And then I did a urine test and a saliva test, and it showed I had no hormones because my sex hormone binding globulin was super high because I'd been put on thyroid medication, and nobody told me thyroid medication raises sex hormone binding globulin. So I wasn't getting the hormones. So if any doctor looked at that, they're like, yeah, you're doing just fine. But I wasn't doing fine. And so when you test via saliva or urine, you're going to get a reflection of free hormone levels. Saliva tests free. Urine tests metabolites, which is a reflection of free levels of hormones. So if possible, if you are a fertile woman, do blood work and do a urine metabolite test like the Dutch test on the same day and take both into consideration. I always like to do both because they can tell you different things. If you're a menopausal woman, that goes for perimenopausal too. If you're a menopausal woman with no hormones, doing blood work is fine. Do it anytime. It's going to show not. It's not going to show much. It's going to show like, oh no, you got no hormones. But it's always good to get the baseline, and then don't do a Dutch test because you don't have enough hormones to be metabolizing. That is going to just show nothing, and so it's a waste of money. And so you want to wait till you're actually started on hormone replacement therapy, if that's your choice, if that's what you're going to do. Then 3-6 months later, do a urine test while taking the hormones to see how does your body metabolize those hormones. So we want to make sure you're going down the safest pathways and that your body's metabolizing these things properly. Now you can do cortisol testing through any of these phases. And if you're going to do that, you have to do it through saliva or urine. Blood work is completely pointless when it comes to cortisol.
Yeah, that morning snapshot. All things considered, it's like we have white coat syndrome. The time is not regulated, and it's 1 point. There's like no
driving
no
to the lab. Yeah.
So in making the decision to go on bioidenticals, you're going off of the blood chemistry and a Dutch test, but we want to do that early enough where we know they're still circulating hormones. But if you're already transitioning, we have like this popcorn effect with the hormones. So it's really like catching the right day. But you're saying if we have both, we have more information and context. What exactly are you looking at? And so you mentioned the Dutch test. For anyone that's not familiar with the Dutch test, yes, saliva and hormone. We get the hormone metabolites across the 24-hour period and the adrenals. It's like the most beautiful puzzle all in one.
It is.
What exactly would make that decision to go on the bioidenticals? And then we have options. We have the estrogen, the progesterone, the testosterone. There's a lot of options here.
Yeah.
It's so personal.
Or what exactly are you asking then? Like, how do we tell if we're ready for hormones?
How do we tell if we're ready for hormones, and what do we start with? Well, like once we have all of those metabolites, do we want to start with the progesterone because they're probably going to start sleeping and it's going to support their mood first? What's the entry point?
Yeah. So progesterone is the first to go typically. So we definitely want to test that. And sometimes we'll just go with symptoms too, right? That's part of it. So I would say there's the three. There's labs, blood labs, urine, and symptoms. And we put that all together because some people could look totally fine, but be getting the symptoms because once again, we don't know what's happening on a cellular level. And so you could have all these hormones, but they're not signaling right. And that's typically because of the xenoestrogens occupying those receptors. So we really want to listen to a woman and hear what she has to say and go by that. And here's the thing, and this is where it gets tricky to answer your question, is every one of us is extremely individual, and genetics have a play in this, where there's some of us women that are born very estrogenic genetically. And that's me. Like you always use myself and my sister. So I'm very estrogenic. And if you look at my genetic report, it shows that. I don't do well with testosterone. I'm curvy. I've always had troubles with keeping my weight down. I got the hips, the butt, the breasts. I had all these estrogen, issues like endometriosis, ovarian cysts, tender breasts. And then there's my sister who's very androgenic, which means that she's very testosterone driven. She is super wiry, up and down, super thin, can put on muscle super easily, really high sex drive, never had a weight problem her entire life, could eat whatever she wanted, never gained a pound. When she started to drop in testosterone, she felt it. When I dropped my testosterone, I didn't notice until it got quite low. And then I noticed, but my estrogen, once again, my levels looked okay, but just a small dip in my estrogen, and I freaking feel it big time. So for someone like myself, it's really important for me to stay on top of my estrogen because my body loves it and my body depends on it. And genetically, that is where I'm driven. Even though in excess, it caused me some problems, I'm still a very estrogenic woman. And so now that I replace my hormones, I have to make sure that I get enough estrogen. And that takes sometimes more than the average person who's not. Like, so my sister, she takes estrogen. She's just like, this doesn't feel good. She doesn't like it right now. But so her levels have to probably get quite low before she even thinks about replacing it. And she's my older sister, and she still at 49 hasn't started to replace her hormones. But I started at 42. And even though I still had a period, because I was getting all the symptoms of estrogen loss. And so each one of us is going to be different. And that's why we need to listen to the patient and say, okay, well, if you're getting hot flashes, night sweats, your vagina's drying up and you've got no libido and you got foggy thinking, but yet you still have a bit of a period left, I'm not going to say to that woman, you shouldn't take estrogen until you're in menopause. Oh, because that's what so many doctors tell their patients. No, we want this transitional period for you to be as nice as possible. And perimenopause can be 10 years, for heaven's sakes. So I'm not going to deny a woman estrogen when estrogen she's been producing her whole entire life. And it's this safe hormone until suddenly you hit menopause and it's unsafe. And it's this dangerous hormone. So I think we top it up as we go along so that we don't get all the symptoms, because women will gain weight. And these are women that have never had a weight problem their whole entire life. And they start to lose their estrogen and they gain 20 pounds in a year. And they're like, what just happened? I did nothing different. But if we had given that woman estrogen from the start when she was needing it and her levels were starting to drop, then she wouldn't have had that weight gain and wouldn't have had all the other issues that went with it. So it's really about timing for each individual and where they're at. So some people, they can go right up until they're in menopause without a cycle before they have to start using estrogen. Progesterone, I really think that, symptom wise, if your period's getting worse, you got heavy bleeding, you feel like you can't sleep in the second half of your cycle, maybe you've put on 5 pounds, because it's a little bit less, we don't see as much weight gain through the progesterone loss as we do estrogen loss. Then putting a little progesterone in the second half of our cycle can be all that you need to just completely eradicate those symptoms and feel good for several years and regulate your cycle that way. And then, okay, now I'm starting to lose estrogen. You're getting the symptoms. Okay, well, let's look at topping up that estrogen then, or testosterone. Some women lose their testosterone, some women don't. We only produce about half of it in our ovaries. So some women can hold on to their testosterone levels as they age, but a lot of women also don't. And so we want to make sure that those are all topped up as well, because testosterone is our most abundant hormone when we're fertile. So all of our estradiol is converted out of testosterone in the ovaries. So testosterone is made first, and then it converts into estradiol. So it's a very important hormone for women. So did that kind of answer your question? I know that was kind of like a roundabout way. There's no straight answer of when to start.
It's so bio-individual. But you did answer. I mean, I like the genetic component. That's really interesting. And of course, like using the labs. And I think you didn't say this, but I know that you do this, is like staying in contact with the patient and continuing to work with them. Because what I see is a lot of doctors will give the hormones and it's like, bye, have a nice life. And they never check up on them.
Or
they
here's
never
your
adjust
pellets. let's inject your butt with these things that you can't get out for 3 months. No idea how that person metabolizes testosterone. See you.
Yeah.
And these women
See
go
you,
away
bye.
with these super physiological levels of testosterone. They start growing beards. I've had women that have had clitoral enlargement, labia enlargement, acne, water retention, hair loss,
Oh
like
my gosh.
horrible things because their body and their genetics, those they're really their genetics, they don't metabolize testosterone very well. So it builds up in their system and they have these really strong reactions to it, or they push down a certain pathway that converts testosterone highly into dihydrotestosterone, which that gives them all those really masculine features. So you don't know that until a woman starts testosterone therapy. And then it's like, oh, you're reacting like this. Okay, we got to back this down. We got to put some stuff in place here. And this is the same with estrogen and progesterone. Some women, they start estrogen and they immediately gain weight and they feel terrible. And so it's like, okay, well, you're probably not metabolizing it very well. Even if they've done a Dutch and their Dutch shows that everything looks okay, they could still maybe have gut problems, or they're not exercising enough to circulate the hormones, or they're stressed, or there's all these different factors that can go into it. Now, some women can take hormones and they're just like, they can be like, okay, see you, I'll see you in 6 months. And they're great. But a very small percentage of women, it takes some tweaking, and it takes usually about 3 to 6 months to find that person's dose. And then it's like, once you find it, then, a year later, everything changes and you got to go back and
always
monitor
changing.
those doses again. Yeah.
Yeah.
Depending
But
on where you're at, right?
Sure. But I think the number one important thing to consider is choosing a practitioner that's willing to stand in that with you and continually tweak. It's scary if you can't get back in with your doctor. And that's sort of the norm where it's like, oh, my doctor's booked and
Yeah.
here I am suffering. I guess I'll wait 6 months until they're available again.
Yeah, or I hear so many women on forums, menopause forums, that'll be like, oh, I tried bioidentical hormones. I mean, I don't know if that's how their tone of voice is, but like, I've tried, that's what it sounds like. I've tried bioidentical hormones and they did not work for me. I felt terrible, blah, 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 blah. And they just like slam it and they're like, never doing that again. And it's like, actually, I would say 99% of the time, we will find something that works for everybody. It just, some people, I've had some women, it's been like a year before we finally got them optimized with how much to take, delivery of the hormones, because that, some women's skin won't absorb hormone creams or patches. We've had the odd woman that needed like injectable estrogen, which is super rare, but we've seen it where women have had to do this. Testosterone cream can cause more hair growth than testosterone shots. So, some people might want to start with cream because they don't want to do the injectable, but then they find that they're growing in whiskers. So we got to switch them over to the injectable. We got to put in maybe some androgen blockers. Like it just like progesterone, oral progesterone. It's the most common prescribed type of progesterone, but there's a growing number of women that have neurosteroid sensitivity problems, which is exacerbated by oral progesterone, because oral progesterone converts to certain metabolites. Cream does too, but oral converts way more to the metabolites. About 80% of oral converts to metabolites, while 20% stays as actual progesterone. So we have women that have to take higher doses to get that progesterone benefit, but now they're getting higher amounts of the metabolites. And there's one pathway of these metabolites, and you can see it on your Dutch test. It's the alpha pathway that acts on the GABA receptors of the brain. And so it's not that you have too much or too little, but you have a sensitivity to this. And so the metabolites are too high for that person. It's one of the causes of PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And so these women, they'll take oral progesterone and they get severely depressed, water retentive. Some women will get angry, like super, super angry. I took too much once and I have a bit of a sensitivity to it. I've never been that depressed in my entire life. Like I could have honestly taken my own life. I was that low and I had no idea it was the progesterone. And then finally kind of dawned on me, wait a second, stopped the oral progesterone and within days it went away. And so this is something that no doctor is talking about. And so you could be put on these, and they'll say, just keep taking it. Maybe we'll give you a higher dose. Like I hear it all, right? But never do I hear a woman saying, oh, well, my doctor said I just have progesterone sensitivity. Never. So
Yeah.
some people can take oral and then we got to, some people can't. And so then we got to switch them to transdermal. Some women need to take it suppository through the vagina. There's multiple different ways and forms of hormones. We typically want to stay away from any form of oral estrogen or oral testosterone. Oral progesterone seems to be okay for the most part, unless you have that sensitivity. And cream does work just as well. There just hasn't been any research done on cream because cream won't show up in blood work. So they think that it's not working.
Oh, geez.
But it does work.
Also
I've
difficult
been on
to
progesterone
titrate.
cream my whole life.
Hard to get the dosage right, depending on what's coming out of the bottle, perhaps.
The cream?
Yeah.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter because day to day in our fertile years, we'd never have the same amount of hormones.
True. It's
Right.
dynamic and changing. Okay. But
Yeah,
as
so
far as
one pump is
measuring, so we
probably-
know what's working, that's not a concern.
No, because usually it'll be, whether you get it through a compounding pharmacy or over the counter, it'll say like my cream is 50 milligrams per pump. And so
Yeah.
you're going to get about 50 milligrams per pump. And it may vary a little bit from pump to pump because it's a bottle of cream, but
That's
still,
normal. It's part of the
It's
dynamic
normal.
process of
Even
the
if you're
body.
taking it
Yeah.
orally, your body, you could have
Yeah.
poor digestion that day or bloated or you ate and you shouldn't have eaten, whatever.
Mhm.
You're not
Yeah.
pooping enough. You could have different absorption rates of that as well. As long as it's getting rid of your symptoms, right? So that's what we want that's when we go to the person and say, okay, well, how are you feeling on this?
Yeah.
And know that you can get to a place where you can eradicate majority, if not all of your symptoms of perimenopause and menopause with replacement.
Amazing.
Again, I'm going to say it one more time. It's so personal. You got to
Very
work with someone like Karen. Karen, are you taking new clients right now?
Our clinic is, yes.
Your clinic is, okay.
personally, my practice is full.
Okay.
But I have an excellent nurse practitioner that works for me. She's taking on clients. And then we also have group coaching. And I'm really involved in that where I do group coaching sessions bi-weekly. And then my nurse practitioner does them on the alternate weeks where we'll do lab reviews for people. We'll sit there and chat with them, and it's very personal. So that's kind of an affordable option for people that maybe can't afford to see a practitioner one-on-one, because it's not cheap. I don't think any hormone practitioner is. But this way you can work with us and take our advice and recommendations and take that to your physician if that's who you're working with for the prescriptions. Or we have an over-the-counter hormone line that's very affordable. So we make sure that kind of every demographic can get the help that they want as far as financial goes, right? So if you want help with your hormones, group coaching is a really affordable offer. If you're not into group coaching and you want the private, we got private, and we can prescribe in every state in the United States, BC and Alberta in Canada. Which is
awesome.
great. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So we see women from all over the world. Now we can't prescribe
Amazing.
all over the world, but we can prescribe in every state.
Educate all over the world. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Okay. Awesome.
Gosh.
'Cause I'm sure there's a lot of women that are like, I need help with my hormones. So we'll definitely, we'll share that in the show notes. And then also your podcast has great information too, if someone just wants to, dive a little bit deeper into the topic and learn
so
more.
much information.
So we'll link to that.
We've got over 300 episodes and
Awesome.
Wonderful. I want to just pick your brain on one last thing before we wrap up, just based on, I'm always seeing like trends in, our environment as we start to learn, like the average person is much more educated than they used to be.
Yes.
Which is very helpful, but sometimes for a detriment, just like the WHI, it's like you hear one piece of information, then we play telephone and then we can't reverse this information. And what I'm thinking about in particular is a compound called DIM, which I think has become super popularized. And now everyone just thinks they should be taking DIM. I would love to hear the nuances of DIM in your opinion and when it's right and maybe when it's not right for someone.
Yeah, that's a great question because it's something that I get a little heated about as well. Because Every woman thinks she's estrogen dominant and that she should be taking DIM. And menopausal women are being told by functional practitioners all the time to take DIM without even any testing being done. I know for a fact that pellet clinics, the Biotech pellet clinics, which is the most popular of the pellet clinics, it's kind of standard to give every single woman, doesn't matter who she is or what stage of menopause or perimenopause she's in, to be given DIM with her testosterone pellets. Every single one. So D-indolmethane, that's what DIM is. And when we look at the Dutch test, you'll see that your body can push its estrogen down these three main pathways. There's 16-hydroxylation, which has some good to it, plus some bad to it. And then there's 4-hydroxylation, which is the toxic of the three pathways. It creates the most DNA damage. We see that women that do develop breast cancer will have higher levels of 4-hydroxylation. And then we have 2-hydroxylation, which is the safest of the pathways that we want to be pushing down. And then that's phase 1. And then we have phase 2, which is called methylation. So your body has to push its estrogen down phase 1. And then it's got to push its way down phase 2, methylation, and then it goes down phase 3, which is pooping it out. So we want to make sure all three of these pathways are up and running so that when you take estrogen or you're producing your own estrogen, that it's being taken out of the system properly. It's being wrapped up and pushed down and gotten rid of. Because if you don't, you recirculate it. And that's when you can get estrogen dominant symptoms. And we don't want that. So DIM is great if you see on somebody's Dutch test that their 4-hydroxylation is elevated and their 2-hydroxylation is too little as far as the amount goes. Taking DIM will take it out of the 4-hydroxylation pathway and push it down 2-hydroxylation. Awesome. That's what we want. It's great. But if a woman does just fine in phase 1 and doesn't do well in phase 2 or 3, if you take DIM, you're going to be dumping out all these metabolites into that 2-hydroxylation, and your body then is not methylating it or pooping it out, and you're still going to get this recirculation. So it can be toxic. It's not good. Now, the other thing that DIM does, and this is a fact, it will lower estradiol. And ladies, let me tell you, out of all the hormonal loss that you're going to experience, it's the loss of estradiol that impacts women the most and has the most detrimental effects on our body, our brain, our heart, our bones, everything, our blood sugar, our mood, our sex drive, our muscle growth. Like the list goes on. There's like over 800 different functions of estrogen in the body. We need it for mitochondrial health, everything. So if you are in perimenopause, starting to lose your estrogen, and somebody puts you on DIM, or you're in menopause and somebody puts you on DIM, you're going to exacerbate all those problems because your body's going to start to get rid of your estrogen that much faster. So it's not something to be willy-nilly about. Like if you are in your fertile years and you're getting these symptoms of estrogen dominance, try and do a Dutch test. If you can't afford to do that, sure, take some DIM, see how it makes you feel. Take a methylated B with it too, just to make sure that all the pathways are getting opened up, not just the first one. Make sure you're pooping, that you're eating enough fiber, that your gut health is in good form, so that we know that all of these pathways, the liver health is all good, and pushing it through properly, and see how you feel. Some women will know right away. They start taking DIM and they're like, ooh, no, that makes me feel like crap. And so then it kind of tells you. So there's like, just be careful. And if you're in menopause, no, I rarely have ever used it in menopausal women.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much for that. Because
I'm glad you asked
plenty of clients that come and in their list of supplements are taking DIM. And then you ask like, why are you taking that? They're like, I don't know. Like, did you test your hormones? No, my doctor just said take it. Okay.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
let's just find out why.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. Such an important topic. Well, Karen, one final question for you and then we'll wrap up. Can you leave our audience with one final piece of advice, something they should do today to optimize their health or hormones or both?
Well, considering I talked so much about negative stuff, I feel like today, like just all these things that can start to happen to you and the lack of information and education and help that we're getting. I still want to leave every woman with the message that this can be the best time of your life. I swear to you. Like when we get into our, like I'm late 40, I just turned 48. And every year it just gets better and better. Like, I'm like, I cannot wait to hit 50. Like, I just like, I'm excited. And we need to start to embrace it and shout it from the rooftops. Not this, like, I'm not telling anybody my age and I don't want to age and I don't want to go through this and then get the wrinkles and the weight gain and this and that. And this can be the best time of your life. Please know that. It's typically a time in our life where we actually start to think more about ourselves and what we want rather than our family, spouses, children, careers. And you get to know, it's like you know more about yourself than you ever have. And it's like, this is so cool. And you feel like you're wiser and just got shit figured out. And if you are going through some really bad symptoms, and this goes on for 10 plus years, that's a huge chunk of your life where it could have been the best time of your life. And it could very quickly become the worst. And know that you don't have to suffer. There's so many options out there. If hormone replacement therapy isn't an option for you, there's still so much that you can do to make sure that you feel good. And so talk to people that understand that and that know what your choices are, and make this the best time of your life. Choose that. Choose to say, you know what, this is going to be the best. I'm going to just like, I'm going to rock my 40s and 50s, like look out, and beyond. And so I just want to leave everybody with that it's not all bad. It can be amazing. And there's so many, we didn't have time to talk about all the amazing things that come with age, but there is a lot. And so know that you can take advantage of those things if you so choose.
Oh,
so beautiful and so inspiring. And you really speak from experience. Like you're glowing. You look beautiful. Like you're the hair, everything's stunning, but your energy, your spirit is really radiating. And so that really speaks to this self-care and this introspection and all the things that you've learned. Like you're like, like wise and educated and rocking it. It's awesome.
Yeah. And that was not me at 42. So trust me when I say it can happen for everyone. You can turn it around.
I love it. Thank you.
So inspiring. So inspiring. I will say my 30s have been better than my 20s. And if you had told me that in my 20s, I would have said you're full of shit.
Yeah. Right.
So I'm excited for my 40s. We'll see if it gets even better, like you said. Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too. I got a month and a half. I'm like, bring it on.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Big birthday coming up.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Actually, when this comes out, it'll be this week. So there we go.
Happy birthday to me.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Karen, thank you so much for everything that you do. Can you tell our audience where they can find more of you, and if they want to opt in the group coaching or one-on-one or all of the offerings, where can they find that?
Social media, Karen Martel Hormones, website, KarenMartel.com, podcast, The Hormone Solution. And at the website, you'll find the group coaching options. We've got a weight loss peptide group, actually, that we just started last year. And that's for women that are in midlife that are gaining the menopausal weight gain and that just haven't been able to get rid of it. So we utilize the weight loss peptides in that group. And then we also have a hormone group for perimenopausal and menopausal women that's been going for 6 years. We've had over 5,000 women go through it. It's been really great. Really great supportive group of women. There's about just over 200 women in that group, usually at a time. But yeah, super affordable, lots of information to be had in there. And it's just month to month. There's no long-term contract, which is nice. And then I just came out with my own line of hormone creams just this year that have really taken off. And those are available without prescription, no need for a prescription for anybody that's in the United States. I've got a really great Biohacker for the face, which is absolutely incredible for anti-aging. The topical estradiol and estriol is like the best thing you can do for your face for aging. Oh my gosh, the best. I actually, if you go on my site in the shop for any of the creams, you'll get a free download of a user guide for hormone replacement therapy. In there, I talk about the study that was done on estradiol and estriol for the face. And it's like, shrunk the pores from 60 to 100% in 6 months, shrunk the wrinkle depth, built the collagen up. Like unbelievable. So anyways, there's a Bias cream that's specifically for the face. And then we've got one of the only low dose estradiol creams over the counter available in the States. Everything else is all a combination of estradiol and estriol, and then a progesterone cream as well. So we've got those 3 available for people that can't get a prescription or don't want to go through a doctor or a pharmacy. They're very clean. They got no crap in them. So it's a nice affordable option for people.
Amazing. Well,
thank you for
congratulations
doing
on that
that.
line, and awesome. So excited to share this with our audience and myself. Shopping.
And I'll give you guys a coupon code.
Yeah.
I'll make it. What do you guys have a specific coupon that you usually use?
Biohacker babes.
Oh, what a surprise.
Easy enough to remember.
Yes.
Yeah.
Biohacker babes, and you can get 10% off any of the creams on your order.
Oh,
anytime.
thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right. We'll put all the goodies in the show notes for today. It was such a pleasure chatting with you. Thanks for joining us.
I can't wait to see you guys in a couple of weeks. We get to see each other in person again.
Yeah, I know. 2 weeks and some change.
Austin.
So
Yeah.
excited. Yeah. More fun,
Yeah.
more education. Thank you.
Yeah.
Always a pleasure to see you and love learning from you. And we'll have to do this again.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Bye, girls.
All right.
All right. Thanks,
And-
Karen. And thanks to everyone for tuning in. We'll see you next time.